To the population of Earth, Gordon Freeman was viewed as the one free man. A person who not only fought against the Combine and survived, but led an entire resistance army towards the Citadel in the heart of the Combine's Earth Empire. His ability to rally up support, take down the administrator, Wallace Breen, and destabilize the Citadel's core was literally game-changing in the fight between the Resistance and the Combine. But in reality, Gordon was not a free man. He was merely a puppet on a string and used by forces outside of our scope to complete a mission. Free will was just an illusion. Just like the Black Mesa incident, the Fall of the Citadel was a perfectly orchestrated event put in motion by the GMan and his employers, a mission given to an agent who had the tenacity to survive against all odds. What needed to happen to bring down the Citadel in City 17? Just how much of this was planned? And why did this need to happen? In this video, we explore the perfectly orchestrated plan that brought down the Citadel in Half-Life 2. As the Citadel's dark fusion reactor spiraled into chaos, the Resistance cheered, believing they had won. But they had not won. They had simply played their part. They believed all of their actions had led to this moment, but the reality was far more calculated. Every move, every action had been foreseen and nudged by unseen hands. The human and Vortigaunt's resistance were not major players in this war. They were just unknowing chess pieces in something much larger than themselves. The war between the Combine and the G-Man and his organization. Gordon Freeman standing at the peak of the Citadel was not an accident. It was the end of a mission. Every event over the past 20 years had been engineered to ensure he would arrive at this exact place, at this exact moment. Now, the Black Mesa incident was an incredible success for the G-Man and his employers. Because of their planning, a resonance cascade had occurred, and Dr. Gordon Freeman had entered the border world of Zen and taken out its ruler, the Nylanth. Without a supreme leader, the G-Man's organization had taken control of Zen, a place that gave them the ability to travel to any world through the border world. Impressed with Gordon's tenacity, the G-Man recommended the scientist's services to his employers, and they authorized him to give Freeman a job. Yet, the G-Man was not clear what the job was, and to deny it meant a battle he had no chance of winning. So, Gordon accepted this job and disappeared. With the survivor dealt with, the G-Man closed the file on this mission and moved on to the next. In reality, Freeman was put in a place outside of space and time, stasis, hired as a new agent. The Black Mesa incident had been a success, but it came with a consequence: the Combine's discovery of Earth. Whether this was planned by the G-Man is unknown. Half-Life 2 was never about liberating Earth. It was the execution of a long-running operation, one in which Earth's suffering was just collateral damage. It came to an end with an explosion at the top of the Citadel, but so many things had to happen in a certain order. Eli had to be taken to the Citadel, Nova Prospekt had to fall, there had to be a resistance army. So many things. As the G-Man and his employers could see every potential future and experience several moments of time simultaneously, who else could make this happen but them? But why did they want the Citadel to go unstable? To understand how the Citadel fell, we must go back 20 years to the moment this plan was first set in motion. We all know the story of the Combine invasion. They assaulted Earth with a mighty force and massacred a huge chunk of the population. It was only when Dr. Wallace Breen, the former administrator of Black Mesa, informed the United Nations that he had discovered a way to communicate with their invaders, that Breen offered the Universal Union the complete submission of humanity on behalf of all of the national governments in return for their lives. Wallace was then granted the position of Earth's administrator by the Combine to control his kind. The planet was then marked into sectors, the human population was moved into heavily controlled and monitored settlements, and Earth's resources were mined. Breen knew of the GMan, and he likely worked with him during the Black Mesa instance. It is not confirmed, but if Breen was given access to the Combine through the GMan and his employers, he would be a pretty easy person to manipulate when the time came. Anyway, Black Mesa had an incredibly high fatality rate, but what was more interesting is that the few survivors all ended up relocating to the City 17 area. And together, over the years, they formed the seed of a human and Vortigaunt resistance. Dr. Isaac Kleiner set himself up a lab in the heart of City 17 that focused on surveillance. Barney Calhoun, a former Black Mesa security guard, was essential in this as he became a double agent when he joined the human arm of the Combine's police force, the Civil Protection, and reported Combine activity to the rest of the resistance. Dr. Eli Vance raised his daughter Alex in secret in his own lab in the canals of City 17. He focused his energy on the exploration of Combine science, salvaged Combine technology in raids of Combine facilities, and welcomed in refugees who had escaped City 17 through an underground railroad he and Kleiner had set up. There was also Dr. Arnie Magnuson, but he is not important in this story. Although the government had attempted to scrub all information about what had happened at Black Mesa, these survivors had an idea of what had happened, and that one of their own. Dr. Gordon Freeman had stopped the resonance cascade after he had traveled to Zen, but had not made it back. Across the main resistance bases and those scattered across the wasteland, everyone knew Gordon's name and of his sacrifice. This was something that the GMan and his employers would utilize. In what was probably the most significant moment before Freeman was removed from stasis to play his part was the fall of Ravenholm. Ravenholm was an abandoned mining town located right next to Black Mesa East. As a result of the success of the Underground Railroad, Black Mesa East filled up pretty quickly with new members, and as the leader of the resistance, Eli Vance expanded his territory into the town. The base itself, however, was still hidden underground and connected to Ravenholm through a tunnel. Yet, the Combine somehow became aware of Ravenholm and bombarded it with headcrab shells. In order to keep Black Mesa East hidden and safe, Eli made the difficult decision to seal the tunnel between the regions. The fall of Ravenholm was incredibly important, and what was even more so was the survival of one man, Father Gregory. As the 20-year period came to an end, someone new joined the resistance and worked closely with Dr. Eli Vance in his lab. Judith Mossman was incredibly intelligent, and since the fall of Ravenholm, the loss for lot of their group, and the uncertain safety of the Underground Railroad, the team worked together to develop teleporters, one in Eli's base and one in Isaac's. Unknown to them, Judith was a double agent and under the orders of Breen, used the Resistance's knowledge and technology to build another one in Nova Prospekt for the Combine. In the 20 years since the Combine's invasion, everything had been set up for the final stage of the plan. A resistance had grown across the wasteland, and they all saw Freeman as a legend. Ravenholm had fallen, and Breen was in a position to be controlled. All that needed to happen was to introduce the agent who could bring everything together. The Ravenholm survivor, Father Gregory, Eli's daughter, Alex Vance, and Civil Protection spy, Barney Calhoun, were all labeled as mission-critical personnel by the GMan in what we will call Operation Freeman. But how could these small factors lead to the collapse of the Citadel in City 17, the main base of operations and headquarters of the Combine, the home of Wallace Breen? On a day that appeared to be like any other, over in Dr. Kleiner's lab in the heart of City 17, the scientist was excited. This was not a regular day, it was a red-letter day. It sure was, but not for the reason he thought it was. This morning had been full of stress and possibility. The teleporter in his lab was almost complete, and Alex had delivered the final piece from Black Mesa East to get it to work. As Alex installed the component, outside of space and time in stasis, Dr. Gordon Freeman was visited by the GMan. To him, it felt like mere seconds since he had defeated the Nilanth and accepted the GMan's offer. He was told to rise and shine, and that his hour had come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all of the difference in the world, and it was time to wake up and smell the ashes. As the GMan spoke, he showed Freeman the inside of the Citadel, the place his journey would come to an end in just days, if everything went to plan. In moments, Freeman found himself on a train entering a city, and from a distance, the GMan watched as Operation Freeman began. By chance, Barney Calhoun happened to be working that day as civil protection, and he spotted his old friend on the security cameras. Freeman had not aged a day in 20 years, and when he almost entered the gate to Nova Prospekt, Calhoun stepped in and instead guided him to Kleiner's lab, with the help of Alex Vance. Even in his first moments back, Freeman really had no choice or agency. He was discovered by Calhoun and guided by others who had been put in place to play their role. At the lab, Freeman was given an upgraded HEV suit and told of some of the events that had happened in his absence. Yet, no one asked how he had survived Zen, where he had been, or how he had not aged at all. But today was one of many possibilities, and Kleiner knew they just had to get Freeman to Black Mesa East so that he could help Eli with his work there. And what better way to get him there than with their new teleporter? Alex stepped through it first, and she made it to her father's lab successfully. However, on Gordon's attempt, something went wrong. Kleiner's head crab, Lamar, jumped into the beam and the teleporter malfunctioned. This malfunction served many purposes, and the side effects rippled across City 17 and the Wasteland. Because of how important this moment was in the timeline, this was absolutely planned, or at least foreseen by the GMan. The overall plan relied on this to happen. Gordon Freeman was teleported across the Wasteland to several places, and out of every place he could have been teleported to, he landed in Wallace Breen's office at the top of the Citadel. Breen had been Gordon's boss at Black Mesa. He knew of the scientist's disappearance, and the man had not aged a day. More than that, he wore the Lambda, the symbol of the resistance, on his chest. Breen knew something was about to happen. This was not just a chance encounter, and the GMan had something to do with this. When Freeman disappeared again, Breen told the Combine what he had seen. The whole city was put on alert to track down this anti-citizen, and the resistance who had heard of Freeman saw just how much of a problem he was to the Combine. Over the hours, the GMan watched as Freeman evaded every one of the Combine's attempts to take him down. With every failed capture, Breen looked weaker and weaker in the eyes of the Combine. It was his job to keep humanity in line. To the resistance, however, Freeman emerged as a warrior, leader, and physical representation of their group as he made his way on foot to Black Mesa East. While a lot of the people in this story were not aware that they were just pawns in a much larger plan, there were others who knew but did not intervene. One of these was the all-seeing Vortigaunt in the canals of City 17. It spoke in riddles and told Gordon, "Far distant eyes look through yours, and something secret steers us both. We shall not name it." The Vortigaunts all had a connection to something called the Vortessence, a power that manifested physically as green electricity, a power they used to communicate with each other over vast distances, and most importantly, to see into the future. The Vortigaunt knew of the GMan and of how he and his employers manipulated events to suit their needs. They were the far distant eyes and they steered them. Still, this Vortigaunt did not reveal to Gordon that he had no control here over his own fate, or that he was just a puppet on a string. Everything that had happened was always meant to happen, and what happened in the future was and always would be. There is a conversation to be had about the true allegiance of the Vortigaunt, but I will save that for another video. When Freeman finally arrived at Black Mesa East and reunited with his old friend, Eli Vance, Judith secretly informed Breen of Gordon's arrival. Now, this is where Breen's position as the administrator of Earth was important to the G-Man. Wallace Breen knew how important it was to deliver localized teleportation to the Combine. If he could give it to them, he could elevate himself in their eyes. Judith's placement in Black Mesa East was essential to this, but because of Freeman's actions, the stress and loss of trust he had for his failure to capture Gordon, he needed to deliver them something quickly. The administrator had a difficult choice to make. If Freeman had not landed in Breen's office during the teleportation malfunction, Wallace would not have put the Citadel on high alert, Freeman would not have evaded his attempts of capture, and the administrator would still have been in good graces with the Combine, unaware of Gordon's return. All while, the G-Man watched from a distance and made sure everything was going as planned. The G-Man and his employers needed this stress to happen for Breen to take radical action, to send a team to assault Black Mesa East to capture Gordon. In less than a day, Gordon Freeman's actions had given the Resistance hope that something could change, and Breen had lost decades worth of trust from the Combine. He knew exactly what this decision would cost him. Sending a team to Black Mesa East would shatter his relationship with Judith Mossman, a scientist who truly cared for Eli. Worse, it could stall their progress on localized teleportation, the one thing that might still make him valuable to the Combine. But at this point, survival mattered more than loyalty. He had to offer them something. It was a tough decision, but the stress orchestrated by the G-Man was just enough to tip him over that edge. At Black Mesa East, as Alex Vance gave Gordon a tour of the outside region, Breen's strike team arrived and attacked. Eli Vance and Judith Mossman were captured and sent to Nova Prospekt, but Freeman was nowhere to be seen. He had escaped through the tunnel to Ravenholm. This is where the importance of Ravenholm comes in. This was a place viewed by both the Resistance and Combine as a place of horror. Headcrab zombies wandered the streets in agony, and Headcrab looked for someone to latch onto. No one entered there willingly. Not Combine, not Resistance, and not even the G-Man. It was the perfect escape route from Black Mesa East from an almost certain capture. The sole survivor of the Ravenholm massacre, Father Gregory also discovered Gordon and made sure he made it through the town. Now, if by any chance Father Gregory were to die during this evening, the assignment would be terminated by the G-Man as Freeman had failed to preserve mission-critical personnel. Because of this, Father Gregory was always meant to help Freeman survive Ravenholm after his escape from Black Mesa East. Ravenholm's fall had never just been a chance event, it was calculated, ensuring that when the time came, Freeman's escape route would already be in place, a place the Combine would not willingly enter to chase him, and crucially, the Combine never knew the tunnel existed. Therefore, the GMan and his employers likely tipped off the Combine about Ravenholm so that it could fall. In the safety of Shorepoint Base, Alex informed Freeman that her father had been taken to Nova Prospekt. It was here that Freeman was given a mission-critical resource, the Scout Car, a vehicle to get him across the wasteland of Highway 17 to Nova Prospekt so that they could rescue him. If this vehicle was destroyed for any reason, the assignment would once again be terminated. The sacrifice of Black Mesa East was a pretty significant part of Operation Freeman. It was the first of two major pillars that led to the fall of the Citadel. It proved to the Resistance that the free man could escape an almost impossible situation and elevated him further as a leader of the Resistance. It also gave Freeman and Alex a reason to visit the second pillar, Nova Prospekt, a place of fear and transformation. So far as we are aware, the GMan only watched from a distance and did not get involved directly, but in the small resistance town of New Little Odessa. Before Gordon arrived, he had to act, to step in and give a little nudge. Although we do not know what he and the leader of the base, Colonel Odessa Cubbage, spoke about, when Gordon arrived there, the Colonel somehow knew a Combine gunship was on the way. He had also just begun training his soldiers how to fire an RPG. What likely happened here is that it was foreseen that Freeman and this base would have fallen to this assault, and the GMan just gave a little help to ensure his agent made it through so he could continue on to Nova Prospekt. Later in the prison, the GMan watched as Freeman fought his way through, reunited with Alex, and discovered the manipulation of Judith Mossman. She fled with Eli through her teleporter, and as Breen sent every unit he could to capture Freeman and Alex, the duo used the teleporter to escape themselves. Just after they disappeared, the teleporter exploded and took the prison and the units here out with it. Everything so far, every small manipulation had led to this very moment, and it rippled once again across the wasteland as the second pillar of this plan crumbled. Firstly, Gordon and Alex had programmed the teleporter to take them to Kleiner's lab in City 17, but due to the malfunction and explosion, they were thrown into a slow teleport loop. What should have taken them seconds to arrive at Kleiner's lab took them an entire week. To them, however, it would have felt like seconds. And secondly, when the Resistance heard that Nova Prospekt, a Combine stronghold, had fallen at the hands of Gordon Freeman and Alex Vance, and they were presumed dead, everything changed. If a structure as heavily revered and protected as Nova Prospekt could be taken out by two people, then maybe the Combine were not as strong as everyone believed they could be. It changed the perception of how the Resistance viewed their captors, and most importantly, Gordon Freeman's actions since his return, the free man, had elevated him to an almost messianic level in the Resistance. His death, and Alex's as martyrs for their cause, was exactly the trigger they needed to begin a full-scale uprising. And so, the battle for City 17 began, the Resistance against the Combine. As for the GMan, he just continued to watch. The return of Gordon Freeman had set off a chain reaction. Without him, Breen would never have taken drastic action. Black Mesa would never have fallen, and Freeman would never have gone to Nova Prospekt. Without Nova Prospekt's collapse, the uprising would never have begun. Every event was a perfectly placed domino, designed to fall in sequence. Just 1 week after the fall of Nova Prospekt, Gordon and Alex arrived in Dr. Kleiner's lab, and they were told that they had been missing for a week and presumed dead. The Vortigaunt in the Citadel had informed the Free Vortigaunt through the Vortessence that Eli had been taken there, and with the city at war, Gordon Freeman took on the role as the leader and symbol of the Resistance, forged by the GMan, as he fought with his army towards the Citadel. With their help, he entered the structure, the Combine's headquarters and direct connection to their overworld. Despite his natural tenacity, Freeman was captured alive with a newly supercharged gravity gun after he entered a transport pod that took him directly to Breen's office at the top of the Citadel. In this inevitable confrontation between Dr. Wallace Breen and Gordon Freeman, the administrator felt relief. He did not look at Gordon as a person with his own actions. He saw him exactly the way the GMan did, a fine pawn for those who controlled him, an agent whose contract was open to the highest bidder. Even as he said this to Freeman, his arrogance and ego blinded his knowledge of the GMan, that nothing happened without meaning. Freeman was always meant to end up here. He, just like everyone in this room, were just pawns. The last week had been stressful for Wallace, and with Gordon Freeman, Eli Vance, and Alex Vance under his control, he believed he could dictate an agreement with the Combine. Yet, a drastic decision he had made came back to haunt him. Judith Mossman had stayed as loyal as she could to Breen, but his assault on Black Mesa East and his threat to send Eli away through a Combine portal was enough to push her to betray him, and she freed the Resistance members as Breen fled to safety. In these final moments of Operation Freeman, Gordon chased Wallace up to the highest peak of the Citadel with his supercharged gravity gun. As Breen began to ascend towards a portal to the Combine overworld, Freeman launched spheres of dark energy into the beam of the dark fusion reactor to stop his escape. Upon contact, as Breen fell to his death and the reactor exploded, the GMan froze time and deemed the assignment a success. He told his agents that he had done a great deal in a small time span. Having done so well, he and his employers have received some interesting offers for his services. Rather than offer him the illusion of free choice, he took the liberty of choosing for him if and when the time came again. Having completed his mission, the crowbar-wielding scientist was placed back in stasis until the GMan had a further use for him. Gordon had been called the Freeman by the human and Vortigaunt he had fought with, but he was no more free than they were. Every action he had taken had been predicted by the organization to get him to the top of the Citadel. There were always variables, however, such as the death of Grigori, the destruction of the scout car, or in a rare case, if he demonstrated exceedingly poor judgment and jumped off a cliff in the wasteland. The Black Mesa incident and the manipulation around it was tame in comparison to this. But why did the GMan and his employers plan this whole thing to happen? Now, before we get ahead of ourselves, I should mention that the events of Half-Life 2 Episode 1 and Half-Life 2 Episode 2 were never meant to happen, at least the way they did. The only reason Alex escaped the explosion and Gordon helped stop the meltdown of the Citadel temporarily for the Resistance to escape the city was because the Vortigaunt interfered. They saved Alex and pulled Gordon from stasis against the GMan's wishes. Gordon's journey was meant to end with the destabilization of the Citadel's core. So, with that in mind, what did the GMan and his organization actually want? Well, we learn later that the eventual fall of the Citadel in City 17 cut off the Combine's forces on Earth from their overworld. Every Citadel across the planet shut down, and in a desperate effort to reconnect, they used the energy from the collapse of the Citadel to start the formation of a super portal that they hoped would allow reinforcements to be sent through. We do not know anything about the GMan and his employers aside from the fact they could manipulate time, teleport, and used people as pawns to achieve their goals. The Combine were aware of the GMan. The whole plot of Half-Life Alyx was about his capture and need to correct the interference of the Vortigaunt. He was a threat, and therefore, outside of the small scope of humans versus Combine, there was a much greater war. The GMan and his employers versus the Combine. Who knows how many planets and times this war was fought across? There is also the Bringrub Shu-Ulathoi theory of how the G-Man is a mature hatched advisor that was not corrupted by the Combine, a greater war of revenge. The Combine used Earth for its resources, so if those resources were cut off, would it have changed the outcome of a larger war? Or was Earth just one battlefield among many? Was Gordon Freeman truly special, or was he just another agent unknowingly fighting for forces beyond his understanding? The fall of Ravenholm, Breen's relocation to City 17, the completion of the teleporter on that day specifically, and the supercharge of the gravity gun were all moments that appeared not to have anything in common, but they were all small pieces of a much larger puzzle to bring down the Citadel. Freeman just did what he was always meant to do, and if the G-Man could control and orchestrate something so intricate, imagine what he and his employers were up to on a much larger scale. Half-Life 2 was just one assignment of many. How many people like Gordon Freeman had they captured and used for missions? We know of Corporal Adrian Shepard, but whether he was deployed is unknown. I really wanted to explore the themes of free will and inevitability in Half-Life 2, to look at the game through a different lens. The fact that the G-Man showed Gordon and us exactly where this story would end right at the start. We never had a choice. Just like Gordon, we followed a path that was always meant to be. Every event was foreseen. Every move was planned. We were just players in someone else's game. It also adds to the theory that the G-Man's organization is Valve. My worry with this script was that it would feel like a simple recap of the Half-Life 2 story, but I really enjoyed exploring this, and I think I succeeded with what I wanted to do with the video, to look at Half-Life 2 in a different way. I cannot help but think about, if this was a real story, just how many lives the G-Man sacrificed in his goal. Black Mesa East would have had a population, Nova Prospekt had a ton of prisoners, and we can be sure that not everyone escaped City 17 before the Citadel exploded. I love this series, and cannot help but think deeper into the world Valve made. Obviously, there was some speculation, and the name Operation Freeman was a nod to Quake. When you realize that no one really had a choice in this story, and they all followed the G-Man's blueprint, it makes it feel so much darker. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I'd love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Cal Drawings, 501st Clone Boy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canufex, Jimsy, Average Soul, Azu, Jonas, Yali Rodriguez, and Detroit. What did you think of this topic? Was Lamar a secret agent of the G-Man? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.